The email arrived at 4:43 p.m. on a Thursday, which tells you everything you need to know about the sender's character. Late enough in the week that you can't march into their office immediately, early enough that you'll spend your entire evening seething about it. Subject: Compensation Review Q2 Final Decision. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit there in my inbox, unread and pulsing like a warning light on a dashboard nobody's paying attention to. I took a long sip of my Earl Grey tea, gone cold hours ago because I'd been buried in vendor contract amendments since 7 a.m. I looked around the open plan nightmare that was Hilux Dynamics, a mid-sized enterprise software company in Austin that somehow managed to smell like kombucha and desperation simultaneously. To my left, the sales pod was celebrating something with champagne that definitely came from Trader Joe's. To my right, 3 product managers were having an intense debate about whether their new feature should be called Snap Sync or Sync Snap. I am Madison Blake. I'm 39 years old. I'm the lead architect for contract infrastructure and licensing compliance. That's a fancy way of saying I'm the person who makes sure we don't accidentally give away our intellectual property to competitors, or worse, get sued into oblivion because some account executive promised a client something we legally cannot deliver. I am the person who reads the 600-page master agreements that nobody else will touch. I'm the reason we still have relationships with our 3 biggest clients after the sales team tried to sublicense our core platform to a company that was actually a front for one of our competitors. I'm the invisible safety net beneath the high-wire act everyone else is performing. I clicked the email. Madison, thank you for your continued patience regarding your compensation adjustment request. After thorough review with the Executive Compensation Committee, we've determined that while your contributions are valued, current budget constraints tied to our Series C fundraising round prevent us from approving increases at this time. Your request has been archived for future consideration. We appreciate your understanding. Best regards, Daniel Mercer, Senior HR Business Partner. Archived for future consideration. I read that line 3 times. It was almost poetic in its corporate cruelty. Not denied. Not rejected. Like I was a document that had been scanned, labeled, and filed away in a digital drawer that would never be opened again. This was the 4th year in a row. 4 years ago, it was uncertainty around the acquisition talks. 3 years ago, it was market correction impacts. 2 years ago, it was reallocation of resources toward product development. Now it was Series C fundraising constraints. Meanwhile, I knew for an absolute fact that Daniel had just approved a $22,000 signing bonus for a junior DevOps engineer who lasted exactly 3 weeks before ghosting us. I knew this because I processed the employment agreement and the termination paperwork. Quick note to anyone listening. If you've ever been told your raise is in the system while watching the CEO post Instagram photos from their 3rd vacation home in Aspen, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It feeds my soul and helps pay for the therapy I'm going to need after reliving this story. I didn't cry. I didn't type an angry response in all caps. I didn't go to the kitchen and passive-aggressively eat someone else's labeled yogurt from the communal fridge. I simply removed my reading glasses, polished them with the microfiber cloth I keep in my desk drawer, and felt something very specific and very cold click into place in the back of my mind. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even disappointment anymore. It was clarity. They thought I was wallpaper. Necessary, functional, completely forgettable. They assumed that because I didn't participate in the office beer pong tournaments, because I didn't wear Allbirds and Patagonia hoodies, because I didn't shout, "Let's go," when someone closed a deal, that I had no power. They were catastrophically wrong. I looked across the office at the sales floor. They were still celebrating. The celebration was for the Fortress Industries account, a $75 million multi-year deal with a massive defense contractor. It was the deal that was going to make Hilux Dynamics a unicorn. It was the deal that paid for the CEO's new loft in downtown Austin. It was the deal that was plastered across every investor pitch deck. It was also the deal I had structured. Not the flashy presentation. Not the handshake and steak dinner. I wrote the actual contract. The master licensing agreement. The 89-page intellectual property indemnification schedule. The revenue share and performance milestone addendum that made everyone's eyes glaze over. I remembered that addendum with perfect clarity. I'd written it 4 years ago, late at night in this very office, when the company was burning through cash and couldn't offer Fortress the equity stake they wanted. We were desperate. Fortress held all the cards. So I got creative. I stood up from my desk. My knees cracked slightly, a reminder that I wasn't fresh out of college anymore. I walked past the sales celebration. Madison. Smile, it's Thursday, one of the account managers yelled, gesturing with his champagne flute. I gave him a measured, professional smile. Congratulations on the quarter, Levi. Well done. I walked toward the records archive room. Most of our contracts were digital now, stored in the cloud with redundant backups. But the original executed agreements, the ones with actual ink signatures and embossed seals, were still kept in physical form in a climate-controlled room on the 3rd floor. I had access. Of course I had access. I was the only person who ever needed to go in there. The room smelled like printer toner and old paper. I found the filing cabinet marked FG Major Accounts, and pulled out the massive binder. It was forest green, nearly 4 inches thick, labeled in my own handwriting. Fortress Industries, Executed Master Agreement Confidential. I opened it to page 56, Schedule D, subsection 7. I ran my finger across the text. The font was Calibri, size 11, single-spaced. Small enough to discourage casual reading, clear enough to be legally binding. In the event that licensor Hilux Dynamics achieves 4 consecutive fiscal quarters of 99.97% platform uptime while processing no fewer than 8 terabytes of encrypted client data per quarter, the performance threshold, and provided that licensor's gross revenue from licensee exceeds $15 million annually, licensor acknowledges that certain intellectual property rights in the core architecture shall convert to a shared royalty structure, entitling the principal systems architect to a retroactive commission of 0.65% of aggregate contract value, unless formally waived in writing by said architect within 90 days of threshold achievement. I flipped to the signature page. Signed by the CEO of Fortress Industries. Signed by our CEO Aidan Brooks. And on the final line in blue ink, Principal Systems Architect / Lead Drafter, Madison Blake. I closed the binder slowly. The silence in that archive room was deafening, but it wasn't empty. It was full of potential energy like a dam about to break. Archived for future consideration, I whispered to the empty room. My race hadn't been archived. It had been hiding in plain sight for 4 years, compounding quietly, waiting for the right moment. I wasn't going to respond to Daniel's email. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to teach them a lesson about the importance of reading what you sign. I slipped the binder into my leather messenger bag. Technically, removing original documents violated company policy. Then again, so did wage theft, and I had a strong feeling that by Monday morning, company policy wasn't going to be my biggest concern. I spent the weekend in my apartment, which is the polar opposite of Hilux's chaos. It's quiet, organized, minimalist. There's a proper desk with a mechanical keyboard, a French press for coffee, and a rescue cat named Fitzgerald who judges me from whatever sunny spot he's claimed. I had the contract. Now I needed the data. Clause 7 in Schedule D was a dormant trigger. It relied on specific performance metrics. If the company performed poorly, the clause meant nothing. If the company performed exceptionally well, the clause woke up and demanded to be fed. I logged into the company's administrative dashboard. My access level was basically God tier. Not because I'd hacked anything, but because 3 years ago our CTO got tired of manually approving my audit requests and just granted me permanent access to the data warehouse. He probably forgot about it. People forget a lot of things about me. I pulled the uptime reports for the last 2 years. Q3 2023, 99.98% uptime. Q4 2023, 99.99% uptime. Q1 2024. 99.97% uptime. Q2 2024. 99.98% uptime. There was 4 consecutive quarters of performance that exceeded the threshold. I remembered those quarters. The engineering team had practically lived in the office. I'd personally coordinated emergency vendor reviews during 3 separate near crashes. The CEO had bought himself a Tesla Cybertruck to celebrate our operational excellence. I'd received a $75 Amazon gift card. Next, I checked the data processing volume. Q3 2023, 11.2 terabytes. Q4 2023, 14.7 terabytes. Q1 2024, 16.3 terabytes. Q2 2024, 19.1 terabytes. Way over the 8 terabytes threshold. We'd blown past it. Finally, I pulled the revenue reports. Fortress Industries was paying us $18.75 million annually now, well above the $15 million trigger. I sat back in my chair. Fitzgerald jumped onto my lap and started kneading my leg with his claws. The math was simple, but the implications were staggering. 0.65% of the aggregate contract value. Fortress was a 5-year deal worth $75 million total. That's $487,500. Plus retroactive adjustment penalties for failure to notify me. Plus interest calculated from the quarter the threshold was met. We were looking at around $600,000. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the structure. I had written Schedule D, subsection 7 as a poison pill to protect the company from getting absorbed in a hostile acquisition. Back when we were a scrappy startup, there was real fear that a bigger player would buy us just to kill the platform and eliminate competition. The clause made the IP expensive to transfer if the original architect wasn't compensated. But the current executive team, most of whom were hired after I wrote the contract, had never bothered to reread the legacy agreements. They treated Fortress like a money printer, pulling revenue from it quarter after quarter, completely oblivious to the tripwire I'd embedded in the fine print. I printed everything. Every log. Every performance report. Every quarterly revenue statement where Aiden bragged to the board about our flagship partnership. I was building a case file. Sunday evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of Malbec, watching the Austin skyline light up as the sun set. I thought about Daniel and his archived for future consideration email. He tried to save the company maybe $12,000 a year by denying my raise. In doing so, he'd forced me to audit my own value. And now I was about to present them with a bill for $500,000. I picked up my phone. I didn't call a lawyer yet. First, I called someone who would appreciate the situation as much as I did. I called opposing counsel. In the world of enterprise contracts, opposing counsel isn't really your enemy. They're your sparring partner. If both sides are competent, there's a professional respect. I dialed the number for Eleanor Voss. She was general counsel for Fortress Industries, a veteran attorney who'd negotiated deals for Fortune 100 companies and who terrified our CEO during contract renewals. She answered on the third ring. Madison. Her voice was sharp and clear. Sunday evening. Either your platform is down or you're quitting. Neither, Eleanor, I said, swirling my wine. I'm doing some housekeeping. I was reviewing the master agreement we executed 4 years ago. Specifically, Schedule D, subsection 7. There was a pause. A long loaded pause. The royalty trigger, Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. He knew. Of course she knew. She was an excellent lawyer. She'd probably flagged it years ago, laughed at how dangerous it was for us, and signed it anyway because it didn't hurt Fortress. The royalty trigger, I confirmed. It appears my company has overlooked the notification requirements. The performance thresholds were met 18 months ago. And they haven't paid you, Eleanor said. Her voice dropped half an octave. It wasn't sympathy. It was predatory interest. Not a penny. In fact, they just denied my cost of living adjustment. Eleanor laughed. It was a dry, cutting sound. Madison, that is profoundly negligent. If they're in breach of payment terms to the principal architect, that compromises the indemnification shield for the entire licensing structure. Technically, Hilux is operating our systems without valid clearance right now. Technically, I agreed. I think, Eleanor said slowly, that I need to review our compliance obligations. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I thought you'd want to know before anything formal happens. I appreciate that. Lunch tomorrow? That place on 6th Street with the excellent ceviche? See you at noon, Eleanor. I hung up. My hand was steady. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a liability. And come Monday, I was going to be the most expensive problem Hilux Dynamics had ever ignored. The restaurant was called Maria. It was upscale, dimly lit, the kind of place where deals were made in low voices and the servers knew never to interrupt a silence. Eleanor was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a glass of white wine in front of her. She was in her mid-50s, silver hair cut in a precise bob, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my rent. She didn't stand when I sat down. She just nodded at the empty chair. Madison, you look like someone who's discovered where the bodies are buried. I helped dig the graves, Eleanor. Of course I know where they are. She smiled. I had my team pull the contract this morning. You're right. Schedule D is airtight. It's actually brilliant. Who let you put that in there? The original CEO. He was terrified of getting acquired and asset stripped. He told me to add whatever protections I thought were necessary. And he didn't realize it protected you from the company itself. People don't read what they sign, I said quietly. Eleanor tapped a manicured nail on the table. Here's the situation from my perspective. Fortress pays Hilux $18.75 million annually. We depend on that platform. If Hilux is in breach of its own internal compensation protocols for the principal architect, that creates a compliance liability chain. If you sue them and obtain an injunction, you could theoretically freeze the platform. I could, I said. But I don't want to damage the platform. I built that architecture. I just want what the contract says is mine. And you want them to suffer a little, Eleanor added. I took a sip of water. I want them to understand that, archived for future consideration, is not a compensation strategy. Eleanor pulled a folder from her briefcase and slid it across the table. This is not legal advice, she said with the standard attorney disclaimer. But Fortress takes vendor compliance very seriously. If we were to discover that a key vendor was failing to compensate its principal architect according to contractual obligations, we would be obligated to issue a formal compliance audit notice. We'd need documentation proving that all IP-related payments are current and free of encumbrance. I opened the folder. It was a draft letter on Fortress Industries letterhead. Mandatory compliance audit, intellectual property compensation verification. The letter demanded proof that Schedule D, subsection 7 had been satisfied. It cited the exact performance thresholds. It requested a response within 72 hours. If you send this, I said looking up at Eleanor, Aiden will panic. Daniel will scramble. The CFO will have a breakdown. Good, Eleanor said. They've been overcharging us on implementation hours for 2 quarters. I've been looking for leverage. You just gave me a crowbar. She leaned forward. You understand, Madison, that once I send this, there's no going back. They'll hunt for the leak. They'll suspect, I corrected. But they can't prove I spoke to you. And even if they could, retaliatory termination for asserting contractual rights in Texas? That's statutory damages territory. Treble damages, Eleanor said, savoring the legal term. Exactly. Send it. Eleanor signaled for the check. I'll send it tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. I suggest you be in the office. The reaction should be spectacular. We didn't shake hands. We didn't need to. We were 2 professionals who understood how the machine worked. I walked out into the bright Texas sun. I felt lighter than I had in years. I went back to the office that afternoon. I sat at my desk. I reviewed vendor agreements. I helped a junior analyst fix a formatting error in an NDA. I was pleasant. I was professional. I watched Daniel walk past my desk carrying a protein shake and wearing AirPods. He didn't even glance at me. Enjoy the shake, Daniel, I thought. It might be the last thing you digest comfortably for a while. Tuesday morning, 9:03 a.m. The office was humming with its usual controlled chaos. The marketing team was arguing about color schemes for a new landing page. The sales team was doing their morning stand-up, which mostly involved people taking turns saying, "Crushing it." Then the email arrived. I didn't receive it directly. It went to Aiden Brooks, CEO, Wyatt Cooper, and Garrett Ellis, our general counsel. I sat quietly at my desk monitoring the email server logs. I had read access to the mail flow metadata. I saw the email from Fortress Industries' legal department hit the server. Subject: Urgent, compliance audit required. It was flagged high importance with a read receipt request. At 9:12 a.m. I saw Aiden forward it to Garrett. Garrett, handle this. Probably just standard quarterly BS. Don't let it slow down the renewal negotiations. At 9:28 a.m. I saw Garrett forward it to Wyatt. Wyatt, they're asking about royalty structures in Schedule D. Do we have any of those? Send them our standard financials and close this out. At 9:47 a.m. the email landed in my inbox. From Garrett Ellis to Madison Blake. Subject: Forward. Fortress being difficult again. Madison. Fortress sent some formal compliance request about Schedule D and architect compensation. Looks like old contract language that probably doesn't apply anymore. Can you draft a standard, we're in full compliance response? Nothing fancy. I need you focused on the patent review for the Series C. Thanks, Steve. I stared at my screen. I had to physically bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. They hadn't read it. They'd seen Schedule D and compliance audit, didn't know what it meant, and immediately forwarded it to the one person in the company who knew exactly what it meant. They were asking the arsonist to investigate the smoke alarm. I opened the email. I clicked reply. Hi Garrett. I'll pull the original files and cross-reference with our performance data. This may take a few days to properly document. I'll keep you updated. Best, Madison. Garrett replied within 60 seconds. Perfect. Take your time. Not urgent. Take my time. I wasn't going to take my time. I was going to let the clock run out. Fortress had given them 72 hours. That was Friday morning. If Hilux missed the deadline, Fortress reserved the right to suspend payments pending investigation. $18.75 million in annual revenue suspended. I created a new folder in my encrypted personal drive. I named it Documentation Royalty Claim. Into this folder I saved the original email from Daniel denying my raise, the email from Garrett asking me to handle the audit of my own unpaid royalties, screenshots of the performance data showing we'd exceeded all thresholds, a PDF of the revenue reports showing Fortress payments, the executed contract with my signature as principal architect. I also saved something else. A Slack conversation from 6 months ago where Wyatt, the CFO, joked with Aiden about creative accounting to reduce reported profits and avoid paying out performance bonuses to the engineering team. I archive everything. Never underestimate the person who controls the data retention policies. Wednesday passed in a surreal haze of normalcy. I attended a meeting where Aiden talked about radical transparency and valuing our people. He presented a slide deck celebrating our platform uptime. We are unstoppable, Aiden said, pumping his fist. Fortress is thrilled with our performance. This is what excellence looks like. They're thrilled with the performance, I thought. They're less thrilled that you're stealing from the architect who built it. I looked at Garrett during the meeting. He was scrolling through his phone under the table, probably checking golf scores. He'd completely forgotten about the Fortress email. To him, it was just another task he'd delegated to the help. I felt something shift in my chest. For years, I'd resented being invisible. I'd hated being the woman in the sensible blazer who fixed the contracts while the men in hoodies took the credit. But invisibility was a superpower now. I was a ghost in the machine, walking through walls, planting charges, and they were handing me the detonator. Thursday arrived. The 72-hour deadline was ticking down. I didn't send the compliance response. I didn't draft the "we're in full compliance" letter Garrett had requested. Instead, I updated the ticket in our project management system. Status: pending executive review notes. Awaiting sign-off from General Counsel. Technically, I was waiting. I was waiting for them to do their jobs. I was waiting for them to open the attachment. I was waiting for them to realize the cliff was right in front of them. They didn't. At 5 p.m. Thursday, the deadline expired. At 5:03 p.m. my personal phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. Radio silence. Impressive restraint. I replied, they delegated it to me. They think it's routine paperwork. Eleanor's response was a single emoji. Popcorn. Friday morning. The executive finance meeting. This was usually a tedious affair where Wyatt tried to explain our burn rate to people who thought EBITDA was a Scandinavian furniture brand. Today the energy was different. Tense. We gathered in the Innovation Lab conference room. Glass walls, uncomfortable designer chairs, a coffee machine that cost more than a used car. Wyatt stood at the head of the table. He was 37, wore expensive sneakers, and had the confidence of someone who'd never been held accountable for anything. All right, team, Wyatt said, clapping his hands together. Fortress payment is late this month. Finance says the wire is pending. Anyone know why? My pulse kicked up a notch. Fortress had frozen the payment. Probably just a bank processing delay, Garrett said, spinning his pen. I'll ping their finance team. Do that, Wyatt said. We need that cash flow for the Series C roadshow. Then a voice spoke up from the side of the table. Actually, I noticed something in the liabilities ledger. It was It was Jameson Blake. Jameson was a 24-year-old financial analyst fresh from UT Austin, smart as hell but still learning how to navigate office politics. There's a flagged item in contingent liabilities, Jameson continued, his voice slightly shaking. Something about a royalty clause. Schedule D. It's accruing at 0.65% of gross contract value. The room went very still. Wyatt frowned. Royalty? We don't pay royalties. We're a SaaS platform. It's in the Legacy Fortress contract, Jameson said, tapping his laptop. The system auto-flagged it because we hit certain performance metrics. The liability is sitting at approximately $487,000 plus accrued interest. Wyatt looked at Garrett. Garrett, what is he talking about? Garrett looked confused. I have no idea. Probably some old boilerplate the previous legal team left in. Ignore it. I can't just ignore a flagged liability, Jameson protested. If auditors see this during the Series C due diligence. Jameson, Wyatt snapped. Reclassify it as a documentation error. Remove the flag. I watched Jameson. He looked at his screen. He looked up and caught my eye across the table. He knew I handled all the contract architecture. He was asking me silently, is this real? I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I just held his gaze with a calm, steady expression that said, don't be a hero, kid. Not yet. Jameson looked back at Wyatt. But if the contract stipulates, remove the flag, Wyatt said slowly, enunciating each word. We are not paying royalties on our own software. Reclassify it as a system error and let's move on. Jameson's shoulders slumped. Reclassifying as error. He typed the command. The red flag on the projected screen disappeared. They had just committed financial fraud. Willful suppression of a known contractual liability in front of witnesses. I quietly opened my notebook and wrote down the time and date. 9:47 a.m. Wyatt Cooper orders deletion of Schedule D liability flag. Jameson Blake complies under duress. Madison Blake present as witness. Madison, Wyatt said suddenly, turning to me. You handle the IP stuff. We don't owe anyone royalties, right? This is just legacy nonsense. This was the moment. The inflection point. I could lie and protect myself temporarily, or I could tell the truth in a way they wouldn't understand. The contract language is very specific, Wyatt, I said, keeping my voice even. Schedule D, subsection 7 exists. It was executed by the founding executive team. Whether you choose to acknowledge the liability is an accounting decision, not a contractual one. See, Wyatt said, turning back to the room. It's an accounting decision. And I've decided it's zero. Moving on. He heard you can decide. He didn't hear you're violating the contract. I looked down at my notebook. My hand was trembling slightly, but not from fear. From anticipation. After the meeting, I got a Slack DM from Jameson. Jameson Blake. Hey Madison, that Schedule D clause. It has your name on the drafting log. You wrote it, didn't you? I hesitated. Jameson was a good kid. I didn't want him to sink with this ship. Madison Blake. Jameson, if I were you, I'd send an email to Wyatt confirming his instruction to delete that flag. BCC your personal email. Just for your records. Jameson Blake. Is it that bad? Madison Blake. Do it now. I saw the typing indicator for a long moment. Then it stopped. 10 minutes later, I got a BCC on an email from Jameson to Wyatt. Subject. Confirmation of instruction liability reclassification. Wyatt. Per your instruction in this morning's finance meeting, I have reclassified the Schedule D royalty liability flag as a system error and removed it from the active ledger. Best Jameson. Smart kid. He just bought himself a life raft. As for Wyatt and Garrett, they just drilled holes in the hull of the Titanic because they didn't like the look of the rivets. That weekend felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to give way. Fortress had frozen the payment Friday afternoon. But because Wyatt had left early for some CEO networking retreat in Fredericksburg, the alarm bells hadn't gone off yet. The accounts receivable team saw the delayed wire, emailed Wyatt, got his out-of-office reply, and decided it was a problem for Monday. Perfect storm of incompetence. Saturday morning I met with my personal attorney. Her name was Simone Park and she operated out of a sleek office in the Domain. Don't let the trendy location fool you. Simone had made senior partners at big law firms cry during depositions. I laid everything out in front of her. The contract binder. The emails. The performance data. The timeline of the denied raises. The notes from the finance meeting where Wyatt ordered the fraud. Simone read through it all methodically, her face expressionless. She had this way of flipping through pages with a sharp snap that made you nervous even if you'd done nothing wrong. Finally, she looked up over her reading glasses. They are monumentally stupid, she said. They're arrogant, I corrected. They think rules are for other people. Simone smiled. It was not a comforting smile. Well, rules are about to become extremely expensive for them. Here's the strategy. Fortress will file for breach. Hilux will panic and try to fire you for negligence in failing to warn them. That's when we countersue for retaliation, wage theft, and since they ordered the deletion of the financial flag, Sarbanes-Oxley violations. I don't want to destroy the company, I said carefully. I just want what's mine and I want them to admit they were wrong. Madison, Simone said gently, you don't get one without the other. They made you invisible. Now you have to become undeniable. She drafted a formal representation letter. To Hilux Dynamics Legal Department Legal representation of Madison Blake IP royalty claims. Don't send this yet, Simone instructed. Wait until Fortress drops the hammer. Then exactly 10 minutes later you send this to HR and legal. It creates a protective shield. They can't fire you while you have an active legal claim regarding the exact issue they're being sued over. I nodded, taking the letter. I went home. I cleaned my apartment with obsessive precision. I needed to do something with my hands, something methodical and controlled. Sunday night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room in the dark, staring out at the Austin skyline. I thought about the last 5 years. The late nights. The weekends I worked for free because we're a family here. The time I missed my best friend's wedding because the platform crashed and I had to personally review every vendor contract for our disaster recovery protocol. I'd given them everything. And they couldn't even give me a cost of living raise. Your raise has been archived for future consideration. I opened my planner and wrote one word on Monday's date. Reckoning. I laid out my outfit for the next morning. A navy blue suit. Severe. Professional. A going-to-war suit. I checked my email one last time before bed. Nothing from Wyatt. Nothing from Garrett. They were sleeping soundly, dreaming of Series C valuations and stock options. I turned off the light. Sleep well, gentlemen, I whispered to the darkness. Tomorrow, you learn what the fine print means. Monday morning. 8:30 a.m. The all-hands meeting. This was a monthly ritual where Aiden stood at the front of the office and told us how we were changing the world of enterprise software. The space was packed. People holding coffee, looking tired, checking their phones. Aiden was up front wearing a black t-shirt that said, Disrupt, under a blazer that probably cost $3,000. This quarter is going to be absolutely massive, Aiden announced, his voice booming. Fortress is expanding their contract. We're projecting 35% growth. The Series C is going to make everyone in this room very, very happy. I stood near the back, leaning against the wall by the emergency exit. I checked my watch. 8:54 a.m. The main doors opened. 2 men in dark suits walked in. Behind them was Eleanor Voss. The room didn't go quiet immediately. It took a few seconds for people to notice. The silence spread like a wave from the back to the front. Aiden stopped mid-sentence. Can I help you folks? Eleanor walked straight toward Aiden. She wasn't rushing, but her stride had purpose. Aiden Brooks, she asked. Her voice carried across the silent room. Yeah, that's me. Eleanor, what's going on? Did we have a meeting scheduled? One of the men in suits stepped forward and handed Aiden a thick envelope. You're being served, the man said. Civil action for breach of contract, willful non-compliance with contractual compensation terms, and unauthorized use of intellectual property. Plaintiff, Fortress Industries. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the concrete floors. What? Aiden's face went pale. Is this a joke? Wyatt. Garrett. Garrett pushed his way through the crowd. Eleanor, what the hell is this? We had a renewal call scheduled for next week. You had a compliance deadline on Friday. Eleanor cut him off. You missed it. Per Schedule D, Section 9 of the Master Agreement, failure to respond to a formal compliance audit within the specified timeframe constitutes material breach. Fortress Industries.